Commander Vex stared at the flickering holographic display with the kind of expression usually reserved for finding week-old socks in your lunchbox. The storm outside was, well, calling it a storm was like calling a supernova a gentle breeze. The winds were howling at roughly 200 kilometers per hour, and the rain was coming down sideways, upside down, and probably from dimensions that hadn't been invented yet. So Vex muttered to his comm unit, "Let me get this straight. We're stuck on this godforsaken rock called Earth. Our ship's about as useful as a chocolate teapot, and now we're supposed to find shelter in, what did the scanner say?" "Oh yes, a cave. Brilliant." The scanner beeped helpfully. Vex wanted to throw it into the storm, but considering it was the only thing keeping him from becoming a very flat alien pancake, he resisted the urge. The cave entrance loomed ahead like a gaping mouth, which was exactly the kind of comparison Vex didn't need right now. He'd been part of the Galactic Survey Corps for 12 standard cycles, and in all that time he'd learned one universal truth: caves were never just caves. They were either full of things that wanted to eat you, things that wanted to sacrifice you to their dark gods, chitties, or things that wanted to do both while playing terrible elevator music. Well, he said to nobody in particular, what's the worst that could happen? The universe, as it turned out, was listening. And it had a sense of humor that made practical jokes look like high art. Vex stepped into the cave, his biosuit's lights cutting through the darkness like a hot knife through butter. Except the butter was made of shadows and had an attitude problem. The cave was larger than expected, with smooth walls that seemed almost carved, deliberately carved, by something with very large claws and apparently a lot of free time. "Okay," Vex said, trying to sound confident and failing spectacularly, "just a nice quiet place to wait out the storm. Nothing weird, nothing dangerous. Just me, the cave, and the sound of my own paranoia." He set up his emergency shelter near the entrance, close enough to make a quick exit if things went sideways. The portable generator hummed to life, casting a warm blue glow that made the cave walls look less like they were about to close in on him and more like they were just considering it. The storm outside continued its tantrum, throwing lightning around like a toddler with anger management issues. Vex checked his equipment, ran diagnostics on his suit, and tried not to think about how his crewmates were probably laughing their scales off at his expense. Lieutenant Zara had probably started a betting pool on whether he'd survive the night. She was thoughtful like that. "A1 in the cave," Vex announced to his personal log, "and I'm already talking to myself. This is either a sign of healthy psychological adaptation or the beginning of a very entertaining mental breakdown." He pulled out his field rations, which claimed to be nutritious protein substitute with garden fresh flavor. The fine print should have added if your garden happens to be on an asteroid made of cardboard and disappointment. Still, it was food, and food was good. Food meant he wasn't going to starve to death before the storm passed. As he ate, Vex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was that peculiar sensation of eyes on your back, except these eyes felt old. Really old. Like they'd been watching things since before his homeworld had figured out fire, much less interstellar travel. "Probably just the storm," he said, taking another bite of his thoroughly mediocre dinner. "Storms make everyone paranoid. It's a known psychological phenomenon. Nothing to worry about." The cave remained silent, which was somehow worse than if it had started making ominous noises. Silence in a cave meant either nothing was there, or something was there, and it was really, really good at being quiet. Vex finished his meal and checked his chronometer. Only 6 hours until dawn, assuming this planet's sun decided to show up on schedule. He'd managed to survive worse situations. There was that time on Kepler 442 billion when he'd been chased by sentient vegetables. Or the incident on Proxima Centauri C where he'd accidentally offended a race of crystalline beings by sneezing at the wrong frequency. "This is cake," he said aloud, settling into his sleeping bag. A nice quiet cave. No vegetables, no easily offended crystal people. Just me and the soothing sound of apocalyptic weather. He was just drifting off to sleep when he heard it. A voice. Soft, barely above a whisper, but definitely there. "You're the first meal in 500 years. Vex's eyes snapped open so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. He sat up, hand moving instinctively to his sidearm, and scanned the darkness beyond his lights. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing in the cave. "Is someone there?" Silence. "Right," Vex said, his heart doing a very impressive drum roll against his ribs. "Any hallucinations? That's what this is. It's too much stress, not enough sleep, and probably something in those rations that shouldn't be there." He lay back down, pulling the sleeping bag up to his chin like it was some kind of protective armor against things that went bump in the night. Or whisper about meals. Or both. "Just the storm," he muttered. "Just my imagination. Just a perfectly normal night in a perfectly normal cave on a perfectly normal planet where nothing wants to eat me." The voice came again, closer this time. 500 years of waiting. 500 years of hunger. This time Vex was sure he wasn't imagining it. The voice was coming from deeper in the cave, beyond the reach of his lights. It was pleasant, actually, like someone reading a bedtime story, if bedtime stories were about extended periods of starvation, and you happened to be the main course. "Okay," Vex said, getting to his feet and drawing his plasma pistol. "I don't know who you are, but I'm armed, I'm trained, and I'm having a really bad day. So if you're thinking about making me your first meal in 5 centuries, you might want to reconsider." A low chuckle echoed through the cave, the sound bouncing off the walls like a rubber ball made of pure menace. "Armed," the voice said, and Vex could hear the amusement in it. "How quaint. Tell me, little morsel, what exactly do you think that weapon will do?" "Well," Vex said, trying to keep his voice steady, "it's designed to create a plasma discharge hot enough to melt through 3 meters of reinforced durasteel. So I'm thinking it'll at least give you a really bad day." 3 meters of durasteel, the voice repeated thoughtfully. "Impressive. I once ate a star that was significantly hotter than that. Gave me indigestion for a century." Vex blinked. "You ate a star, only a small one, red dwarf. Barely a snack, really." "Right." Vex kept his weapon trained on the darkness, though he was beginning to suspect it might be about as effective as harsh language. "So what exactly are you?" "I am ancient," the voice said, and now Vex could hear movement in the depths of the cave. Something large was stirring. "I am hunger. I am the thing that waits in the dark between stars, feeding on the light of dying suns and the dreams of civilizations that forgot to duck." "That's poetic," Vex said, "also terrifying. Mostly terrifying." "Thank you. I've had a lot of time to work on my introduction." The movement was getting closer. Vex could feel vibrations through the cave floor, like something massive was shifting its weight. His biosuit's sensors were going crazy, detecting energy signatures that didn't fit any known classification. "So," Vex said, backing toward the cave entrance, 500 years is a long time to go without eating. You must be pretty hungry." "Ravenous," the voice confirmed. "You have no idea what it's like, little one. To exist in the spaces between spaces, watching civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore, and not be able to taste a single one of them." "Yeah, that sounds rough." Vex was almost to the entrance now. The storm was still raging outside, but suddenly getting struck by lightning seemed like a relatively minor inconvenience. "But here's the thing. I'm not actually that nutritious. Mostly just protein and bad life choices. You'd probably get more satisfaction from a decent sandwich." "Oh, but you're wrong," the voice said, and now Vex could see something moving in the darkness. Something that made the shadows look bright by comparison. "You see, I don't just consume flesh. I consume experience. Memory. The weight of lives lived and choices made. And you, little traveler, you've been places. You've seen things. You're practically marinated in adventure." "Great," Vex muttered. "I'm a walking appetizer." The thing in the darkness moved closer, and Vex caught a glimpse of what might have been an eye. Or possibly a small moon. It was hard to tell the difference when you were dealing with entities that snacked on celestial bodies. "But I'm curious," the voice continued, and Vex could hear something that might have been genuine interest. "You're not running. Most species would have fled by now, storm or no storm." They'd take their chances with the lightning rather than face the dark. Yeah, well, Vex said, still holding his weapon but no longer pointing it at the darkness. I'm not most species. I'm human. Well, technically I'm Zorathian, but I was raised by humans. Close enough. What's enough? Human, the voice repeated, and there was something different in its tone now. Something that might have been surprise? You're human? Honorary human, Vex corrected. But yeah, I've picked up most of the major human traits. Stubbornness, terrible decision-making, and a tendency to make jokes when I'm about to die. The movement in the darkness stopped. Human, the voice said again, softer this time. It has been a very long time since I've encountered one of your kind. Really? Vex said, his curiosity overriding his survival instincts. When was the last time? Approximately 500 years ago, the voice said, and now Vex could hear something that definitely wasn't hunger. It was sadness? He was lost like you, seeking shelter from a storm that was not quite like yours. What happened to him? I ate him, the voice said simply. But not before he told me the most remarkable stories. Tales of a species that refused to accept the impossible, that looked at the vast darkness of space and said, "Hold my beer," before diving in head first. Yeah, Vex said, lowering his weapon slightly, that sounds like humans. He spoke of wars fought against odds that would have made gods weep, of explorers who walked into the unknown armed with nothing but curiosity and an alarming disregard for their own safety, but of a species that had turned stubbornness into an art form. That's actually a pretty good description. And he laughed, the voice said, and now Vex could hear something that was definitely wonder. Even as I prepared to consume him, he laughed. He told me jokes. Bad ones mostly, but jokes nonetheless. Do you know what it's like to hear laughter after 10,000 years of silence? I'm guessing it's either really nice or really disturbing. Both, the voice said. It was both. The cave fell silent again, and Vex found himself in the peculiar position of waiting for a cosmic horror to continue its story. This was definitely going in his report, assuming he lived long enough to file one. So, Vex said carefully, you ate him because you were hungry? I ate him because that is what I do, the voice replied. I am hunger. I am the space between stars. I consume because consumption is my nature. Right. And now you're going to eat me because it's been 500 years and you're hungry again. That was the plan, the voice admitted. But you're human, or human enough. And the last human I encountered changed something in me. His laughter, his stories, his absolute refusal to accept that he was about to become a meal. It was the first time in millennia that I felt anything other than hunger. So you're having second thoughts about eating me? I am having thoughts, the voice said, and Vex could hear confusion in it. That is unusual. Vex considered this. On one hand, he was talking to a cosmic entity that had just admitted to eating his last conversation partner. On the other hand, the entity seemed to be experiencing something resembling doubt, which was probably the closest thing to a positive development he was likely to get. Tell me, the voice said, what stories do you carry, little human? What tales of impossible things made possible? And that's when Vex realized something that made him want to laugh and cry at the same time. He was about to become either the first human to talk his way out of being eaten by a cosmic horror, or the second human to entertain said horror before becoming lunch. Either way, it was going to be one hell of a story. Vex took a deep breath, which was probably a mistake considering the circumstances, but old habits die hard. Even when you're about to become lunch for something that casually mentions eating stars. Stories, he said, holstering his weapon completely. You want stories? Well, you've come to the right place. I've got more stories than a politician has excuses. The darkness shifted and Vex got the distinct impression that something vast was settling in to listen. Like an audience of one that happened to be capable of devouring solar systems. But here's the thing, Vex continued, settling back against the cave wall. Human stories aren't just about what happened. They're about what we learned from making spectacularly bad decisions and somehow surviving them. Tell me, the voice said, and the hunger in it had been replaced by something that might have been genuine curiosity. All right, Vex said, warming to the subject. Let me tell you about the time humans decided to pick a fight with the Nexus Collective. You know, the galactic empire that controlled half the known universe and had technology that made gods look like toddlers with finger paints. The Nexus Collective, the voice repeated thoughtfully. Yes, I remember them. They lasted approximately 3,000 years before they disappeared. I assumed they had simply evolved beyond physical existence. Nope, Vex said cheerfully. Humans happened to them. There was a pause that stretched long enough to make Vex wonder if he'd broken the cosmic entity's brain. Humans happened to them, the voice said slowly. Please elaborate. Well, it started with a misunderstanding. The Nexus showed up in human space, all glowing ships and superior attitudes, demanding tribute. Standard galactic empire behavior, really. Most species would have just paid up and called it a day. But not humans. Oh no, Vex said, grinning despite the situation. Humans took one look at these self-proclaimed masters of the universe and said, "Hold on there, Sparky. We need to have a conversation." Except the conversation was conducted primarily through the medium of explosions. They fought the Nexus Collective? They didn't just fight them, Vex said. They studied them, learned their patterns, figured out their weaknesses, and then they did something that had never occurred to the Nexus in 3 millennia of existence. What? They got creative. The voice was silent, waiting. See, the Nexus had this whole philosophy about order and control. Everything in its proper place, everyone following the rules. They'd conquered half the galaxy by being predictable, methodical, and overwhelmingly powerful. Their strategy was simple: show up, demand surrender, obliterate anyone who refused. A sound strategy, the voice observed. Against anyone but humans, Vex said. Because humans have this peculiar trait. The more impossible something seems, the more determined they become to prove it's actually quite possible. But they call it spite. Spite? The art of accomplishing the impossible purely to annoy people who said it couldn't be done. Vex could hear something that might have been laughter echoing in the darkness. So the humans decided to spite the Nexus Collective out of existence? Not exactly, Vex said. They decided to do something much worse. They decided to make the Nexus Collective human. I don't understand. The Nexus ruled through fear and overwhelming force. They'd never encountered a species that responded to oppression by getting more creative. So when humans started showing up at Nexus worlds with supplies, medical aid, and terrible jokes, the Nexus didn't know what to do. They provided aid to their enemies? They provided aid to everyone, Vex said. Nexus civilians, slaves, even some of the lower-ranking officials. No strings attached, no demands for loyalty. Just, hey, we noticed you're having a rough time. Here's some food and medicine. Also, have you heard the one about the space captain and the quantum physicist? That's tactical nonsense. That's humanity, Vex said. They turned the entire war into a conversation. A very loud, explosive conversation that lasted about 50 years, but still a conversation. And conversations, as it turns out, are contagious. Contagious? The Nexus had spent 3,000 years ruling through fear. Their entire society was built on the idea that they were superior and everyone else was inferior. But humans kept treating them like people. Regular people who happened to have fancy technology and serious attitude problems. Vex paused, remembering the history lessons from his academy days. It started small. Nexus soldiers who stopped shooting because humans were sharing their rations. Nexus civilians who started asking questions about why they needed to conquer everyone in the first place. Nexus officials who began to wonder if maybe there was a better way to run a galactic empire. And this worked. Oh, it worked beautifully, Vex said. The Nexus Collective collapsed from the inside out, not because humans destroyed them, but because humans convinced them to destroy themselves and rebuild into something better. What happened to them? They became the Galactic Cooperation Council, Vex said. Democratic, peaceful, and absolutely terrible at organized warfare. They spend most of their time now arguing about trade regulations and hosting cultural exchange programs. The humans defeated a galactic empire through the power of friendship. The humans defeated a galactic empire through the power of being aggressively decent to everyone they met, even people who were trying to kill them. The silence that followed was so profound that Vex began to worry he'd accidentally offended something that could eat planets. That, the voice said finally, is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Yeah, humans have that effect on people. And it actually worked? It worked so well that half the galaxy now operates on human principles. Be excellent to each other has become official policy for 17 different species. 17 species have adopted human philosophy? 43 actually, Vex said. But I was only counting the ones that have made it official policy. The others just sort of picked it up through cultural osmosis. Cultural osmosis? Humans are persistent. They show up places, start helping with problems, tell terrible jokes, and before you know it, everyone's acting slightly more human. It's like a very friendly virus. And a virus of decency. Exactly. Though humans prefer to call it being neighborly. The voice was quiet for a long moment, and Vex could hear something shifting in the darkness. When it spoke again, it sounded different. The human I met 500 years ago, the voice said slowly, he tried to tell me similar stories. About impossible victories and the power of stubborn optimism. I thought he was simply trying to delay the inevitable. Maybe he was, Vex said. Or maybe he was trying to plant a seed. A seed. An idea. A possibility. A chance that maybe, just maybe, there was something better than an eternity of hunger and darkness. I am what I am, the voice said, but there was less certainty in it now. I am hunger. I am the void between stars. I cannot simply change. Says who? Says everyone. Everything. The fundamental laws of existence. Yeah, well, Vex said, getting to his feet. Humans have a long and distinguished history of telling the fundamental laws of existence to go sit in the corner and think about what they've done. That's not how reality works. Reality is negotiable, Vex said. Trust me, I've seen humans renegotiate the laws of physics through sheer bloody-mindedness. Reality usually gives in around the third or fourth attempt. You're suggesting that I could simply choose not to be what I am. I'm suggesting that maybe what you are isn't what you have to be, Vex said. Maybe hunger isn't your nature. Maybe hunger is just what you've been doing for so long that you've forgotten there are other options. Other options? When's the last time you tried not being hungry? The silence stretched for nearly a full minute. I don't remember, the voice said finally. It's been so long since I was anything other than hunger that I can't recall what else there might be. Well, Vex said, there's curiosity, wonder, the satisfaction of learning something new, the joy of making someone laugh, the warm feeling you get when you help someone solve a problem. You're describing things I consumed long ago. No, Vex said firmly. I'm describing things you could experience. Right now. Today. In this cave with a stubborn alien who's too stupid to know when he's supposed to be terrified. And how exactly would I experience these things? Easy, Vex said. Instead of eating me, try talking to me. Ask me questions. Share stories. Find out what it's like to have a conversation that doesn't end with someone being digested. That's absurd. Most of the best things are. The darkness shifted again, and Vex got the impression that something vast was considering possibilities it had never imagined. If I don't consume you, the voice said slowly, what happens to my hunger? Maybe it gets replaced by something better, Vex said. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you'll always be hungry, but you'll have other things to focus on. Maybe you'll discover that the universe is full of nourishment that doesn't require eating anyone. Such as music, art, mathematics, the satisfaction of solving a puzzle, the joy of seeing someone succeed against impossible odds, and the laughter of friends sharing terrible jokes. You're describing ephemeral things, meaningless distractions. I'm describing the things that make existence worth existing, Vex said. The things that humans fight for. The things that matter more than survival. And if I try this conversation and find it insufficient, then you'll have learned something new, Vex said. And learning something new is its own kind of nourishment. The voice was silent for a long time. When it spoke again, it sounded almost tentative. What would we talk about? Anything you want, Vex said. The places you've been, the things you've seen, the civilizations you've watched rise and fall. I'll tell you about the weird corners of the galaxy I've visited, the strange aliens I've met, the impossible things I've witnessed. And this conversation would be sufficient. You wouldn't become bored. Are you kidding? Vex said. You're a cosmic entity that's been alive for millions of years. You've seen the birth and death of stars. You've witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. You're probably the most interesting conversationalist I've ever had the chance to meet. Even though I was planning to eat you? Especially because you were planning to eat me, Vex said. Anyone can have a boring conversation. It takes real talent to have an interesting conversation with someone who was considering you as a snack. The sound that echoed through the cave was definitely laughter this time. Not the menacing chuckle from before, but something warmer. Something that sounded almost human. Very well, the voice said. Let us have this conversation. Tell me, small human, what is the strangest thing you've ever seen? Oh, that's easy, Vex said, settling back against the cave wall. I once watched a human convince a black hole to change its mind. Black holes don't have minds. That's what everyone said. Right up until the humans started arguing with it. And as the storm raged outside, Vex began to tell the story of Captain Sarah Mitchell and the persuasive singularity incident, while somewhere in the darkness, an ancient entity that had known only hunger for millions of years discovered the simple pleasure of being surprised. By dawn, when the storm finally passed, neither of them wanted the conversation to end. The entity, who had decided to call itself Echo after hearing Vex's stories about the importance of names, had agreed to travel with him. Not as a passenger, but as a companion, someone to share the journey and the stories yet to come. You know, Vex said as they prepared to leave the cave, I came here looking for shelter from a storm, and I'm leaving with a friend who used to eat stars for breakfast. I still might eat the occasional star, Echo said, its voice now carrying amusement rather than hunger. But only the ones that have gone out anyway. No point in wasting good starlight. That's very environmentally conscious of you. I'm learning, Echo said. It turns out there's a lot more to existence than I ever imagined. Wait until you meet the rest of my crew, Vex said. They're going to absolutely lose their minds when they find out I made friends with a cosmic horror. Is that what I am? A cosmic horror? You were, Vex said. Now you're just cosmic. The horror part seems to have gotten lost somewhere in the conversation. Good, Echo said. I never much cared for the horror part anyway. It was always so lonely. As they walked toward the cave entrance, where Vex's emergency beacon was finally getting a response from his ship, Echo asked, what happens now? Now, Vex said, we go have adventures. I see impossible things. We meet interesting people. We solve problems. We tell stories. We laugh at terrible jokes. We live. And if we encounter others like I used to be, other entities consumed by hunger and darkness, then we tell them about the better options, Vex said. We show them that conversation is more nourishing than consumption. We prove that friendship is stronger than fear. And if they don't listen, then we tell them better stories, Vex said, because in the end, that's what humans do. We tell stories until everyone remembers that there's more to existence than just surviving it. As they stepped out of the cave and into the morning light, Echo's voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there the night before. I think, Echo said, I'm going to like being human. You're going to be terrible at it, Vex said cheerfully. We all are. That's the point. And somewhere in the distance, Vex's ship was approaching, carrying a crew that was about to have the most interesting day of their lives. But that, as they say, is another story.